Welcome, welcome, everyone. I'm so excited that you're here. I am about to have the most awesome chat with one of my very dear friends, and many of you know her as Lyla Sage. She is a professional light-filled astrologer. She is an all-around amazing human and truly incredible. She actually just finished law school and took the bar and is a vast array of knowledge. She speaks 5 languages, is that right? And
Yeah.
just you know so much about so many topics. And we know her as Lyla Sage, and her legal name is actually Julie. And we are here to talk about that and talk about human design, light-filled human design, and just have an amazing conversation all around. So, Julie, would you like to share with us anything that you would like to at this point?
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much for that introduction. For a while, I have been going by Lyla Sage, like you said, and a big part of that was my journey through law school, my journey taking the bar, and, wanting to keep my astrological work separate from my legal work. But now that I've taken the bar, there's no reason to kind of keep those two separate and to keep my identity separate. So, yeah, I'm just making the announcement so we can all be on the same page about my name and that I'm Julie Dean Richards. And like Naomi said, I am an astrologer and I am so excited to have this conversation with you about human design.
Thank you so much. I always love talking to you. It really is whatever subject, whether it's health or astrology or human design, you're not only so well researched, but your wisdom is incredible. And I just am so excited to share you with my audience and be able to have them get to know you even better, even though so many of them have already had sessions with you, they've already been working with you. So we are right at the beginning of the enrollment for the light-filled human design certification, which is extremely awaited and in demand. And I'm so excited to talk with you about this because your experience has been powerful, like so many, when you encounter human design, specifically light-filled human design. But especially as a reflector in human design, you probably had some life-changing experiences being able to dive in and comprehend what this meant for you and how distinctive that you were compared to basically anyone that you know. Do you know any other reflectors in real life?
I've never met a reflector in real life. I did do one session with a reflector, but that's it. That's the first time I've ever met someone who was a reflector. So it's been an exciting experience being the only one.
Yeah, for sure. And I would imagine this has given you some language to be able to explain to the people in your life a little bit more about you. Share some about how that experience was for you when you first encountered human design, when you really were able to grasp that you were a reflector and what that meant, and then what you did from there.
Yeah, so it's as I was trying to explain it, like when I first found this out, I found this out through a friend, I don't know, years ago, and she just didn't really tell me anything about human design. She was just like, "Here, put in your information," and she knew I was an astrologer, so and we'll just see what you are. And I said, "It says reflector," and she freaked out. She freaked out. She was like,
I'm
"Oh
sure.
my gosh, you're the rarest type. How did you do that?" I'm like, "I don't know. I was
How
just
did you do
born."
that?
you know and she was explaining it to me, and then later as I was explaining it to my husband, he was like, "Oh, so you're basically Rogue from the X-Men, like that's what you are." like and he was like, "Oh, I've always known that about you, like I've always known that you're just open to everyone, right? Like you're just open to a lot of these different things and you can take on everybody's experiences." And so for me, it's been great to, at first, I think some people get hung up on this idea of, oh, I don't have an identity, right? Like I don't have my own personal identity. And actually, for me, my identity center has no gates. So it's
Yeah.
like the only part of my chart, zero gates, which is unusual even for a reflector. That's pretty
Yes.
unusual.
Yes, it is.
Um, and I've always, I think that's why I always identified with my chart in astrology because I'm a Cancer sun and a Capricorn moon. So I am the opposite of each other. My moon and sun are opposed to each other. And I always thought about that as, because they're so far away from each other, it allows me to take in everything in between, right? It allows me to, whereas, people whose sun and moon are the same sign sometimes have a harder time. It's more difficult for them to see other people's perspectives. But for me, it's easier. And this was just, showing me that again, that it's easier for me to be open to people, open to their identities. And it explained a lot to me why I always felt like, oh, I can feel what they're experiencing.
Hmm.
I can feel so deeply. Like it's like I had that experience with them, and people tell me about their stuff and I'm like crying. They're crying, I'm crying, right? Because I'm like, yes, I know what that feels like. So that's just been so helpful for me to understand, myself in that context and still know that I have my own identity, right? But that I'm just open to everyone's experience. I'm open and I have that empathy and I can feel what it feels like to be everybody, I guess.
I love that so much. And I'm curious if there's reflectors that are listening to this, if you're resonating with a similar way that Julie has experienced it, definitely comment. But also, like, even just the openness of feeling, like those that have an undefined emotional center are like, oh, I feel that way too. Maybe I'm a reflector, or why do I feel so much that way? It's like each individual center is either taking in or putting out energy, depending on if it's defined or undefined. And with yours being all undefined, especially that identity center being what's called open, not just undefined, but by technicality, it's open, meaning absolutely no active gates in there. It really creates a profoundly unique experience that I think lends to your gifts and being able to help people and really fully comprehend their experience because you can literally put on their identity temporarily to understand them in a deeply empathetic way. I also have
Mhm.
an undefined identity center, but I have two gates active in it. And so, like, and I can feel those, I can sense when those come about, and I can sense that I'm still putting out that energy. I'm still the inceptor of that energy. If it's between me and another person that doesn't have those, I can sense it and I can feel it. And for you to just be so open-hearted is really what it is, because the identity
Mm,
center is the heart chakra. It's
mhm.
it's that the heart chakra kind of actually split in 1781 when we went from being a seven-centered being to a nine-centered being, and the heart chakra became the identity center or the G center, and the heart center or the ego center. And you have, of course, both of those undefined. And so you're extremely open-hearted, and you're also extremely susceptible to other people's opinions about themselves and about you and about worth and about all of these things. So being so careful about who gets to be in your space is 10 out of 10. Is that something that you kind of had already discovered the wisdom of before understanding human design? Or was that something that really kind of solidified for you after you were able to kind of understand this about yourself?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think I always had a little bit of a feeling about that. I I related over time. I've had deep experiences in the past before I knew about human design where, people's opinions of me or of themselves deeply affected me.
Hmm.
Felt really isolating, felt alone. I lived in Japan for a little bit as a teenager. I was an exchange student there, totally away from my family. And one of my friends, there was just it all came down to a communication misunderstanding, right? We're speaking a different language, and there just was a cultural misunderstanding. But the kids in my classroom saw me because of that almost as an enemy to them, and I could feel that really deeply. And one of the boys had said to me, he said, everybody hates you. He told me that everybody hates you. And that was, so like heart-wrenching for me, like deeply, deeply wounding. And now with this perspective of human design, right, I can go back and understand, that I'm just a reflection of them, and it's not them really saying they hate me. They may say that, but it's them reflecting on themselves, that the dislike for themselves. And I have noticed that people I don't get along with, or like people who really dislike me. I can only think of two people right now who really really dislike me, but these are individuals who truly dislike themselves, like
Hmm.
really really do not like themselves.
Yeah.
And when you're a mirror, when you reflect to people, right? On themselves, you find out what people really think about themselves,
Yes.
you
Yeah, in
find
a way
out.
that no other type can possibly have that experience. Like there's people that are very, very open, like they maybe only have two centers or three centers defined, and so they've got a lot of openness. And there is a mirror aspect to that. My sweet husband has only three defined centers and six undefined, so quite a lot that's open, and he really does mirror back a lot. But it's a wildly different experience than actually being a reflector and having no definition, nothing that truly is consistently putting out the energy of a particular center. And so
Mhm.
I love that you have the ability to articulate this, and like obviously you knew a lot of things about yourself. I know for me the things that I sensed about myself and then were clearly defined in human design, it was this huge permission to just fully lean in instead of partially
Mhm.
kind of sort of knowing something, sort of wonder like not really realizing that other people weren't having that same experience, but to be like, "Oh, this is a very unique experience to me," and to fully claim it and to totally drop the expectation that I needed to show up in a different way. I think that is the most universal experience with human design. And like I would imagine for you being so unique and having so much about your chart that is unrelatable to other people's charts allowed you to just fully lean into your uniqueness.
Yeah, it is. And my husband and I talk about this often. He actually only has one defined center. That's it, just his
Oh,
ajna.
one channel. You can only
Oh, one channel. That's
yeah,
what I mean.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because
Yeah.
he's a projector.
Yeah, he's a projector, yeah.
Mhm.
So he's only got that one channel, which is good for me, I feel like, because I pick up that, like, I don't have to be right all the time from him, because he's got that defined, um, which is nice. And I think, we talk about this, that everybody wants to be special and unique, and everyone is. Everyone is
Truly,
totally
yes.
special. Everyone is unique. Everyone is rare, but it is difficult to be the 1% sometimes. Like it can be a lonely experience, right? It can be a lonely experience when you don't there aren't other people like you, or you're like everyone and not like everyone at the same time, right? You're a living
Yeah.
contradiction all the time. And that's kind of how I feel about myself sometimes. I'm a living contradiction, which is great. It really helps me to be close to other people, but that's what human design has done for me in many ways. Is it's validated so much of that sense of, like, yeah, you are the 1%, and that's okay. It's okay to be the 1%, and it's okay to have these deep, rare connections, and then use that as your superpower. And I think that's what it can give to everybody. And I
Yes.
think everyone can relate to that on some level, for sure, that they are rare, everyone is unique and special, but this allows you to have that power brought back to you and use your superpower in the way it's meant to be used.
Absolutely. I also think that there's something about finding others that are like you, to claim your
Mhm.
uniqueness, but to be like, oh, like we share this thing in common, this life experience that is so repeated that maybe is distinctively different than somebody in our family of origin or than our spouse or our children or our friends. I love the quote. You made me think of the quote by Maya Angelou that is the pinnacle core idea for Brene Brown's Braving the Wilderness book. It is, you are only free when you realize you belong no place. You belong every place, no place at all. The price is high, the reward is great.
Mhm.
And I love that in the context of reflectors. And of course, so many can relate to that. There's so many things with human design where it'll be like, oh, this is such a reflector thing, or this is such a manifesting generator thing. And then other people will still relate to it. And so it's very freeing to give that language, but it also helps us to claim what is and isn't ourselves. And I think that that's so incredible. One of the things you and I were chatting about, which is kind of an advanced concept in human design, um, that not a lot of people talk about because it is so complex and layered, but also so potent in it, is the idea of motivation and then
Mhm.
also environment and how you have blended those or how you have integrated those. So, do you want to share what you have come to understand about your motivation?
Yeah, totally. So it's gonna sound when people sometimes hear the words of the motivation, they're like, what do you mean? That's negative. There's a negative connotation, but it's really not. But so my motivation is guilt, which people are like, oh, guilt, that's bad. That's bad. We don't want to be feeling guilt all the time, but that's not what it's really about, right? It's really about
Mhm.
seeing people's needs, feeling a need to do things, to fix things,
Yeah.
helping people.
Yeah.
That's really what it's about. So that has been really helpful for me to understand, like, oh, this is where my motivation comes from. I want to fix things. I want to help people with these things, and I want to help teach people how they can decondition themselves, right? So I'm sure you can speak more to that, but that's my impression of it for
I
sure.
love it. And I love the people in my life that are guilt motivation. It's really
Mhm.
interesting to observe them. And what I love about the motivation part in human design is it can be such an additional clue or key to kind of checking to see if you're on the right path. It's another barometer for like how aligned are you being to who you truly divinely are? Because in all the motivations, there's also what's called a transferred motivation. And when we're in our transference, that's like the not self. It's the part that we sort of as our go-to grab when we're kind of in panic. And so most of us are living in our transferred motivation like a lot. And it
Mhm.
even after you understand it, it still is like a regular choice. Like when you slip into it, it's like, oh, there I go again. And
Mhm.
it's like an airplane. Like airplanes don't fly straight, from Los Angeles to New York. It's infinite numbers of course corrections all along the way. And, it's not like the pilot is like, oh, they get there and they're like, I screwed it all up the whole time. It's like, no, you got there. Yay, way to go. Like, that's part of life. And so we're constantly course correcting. And there's lots of tools in the world to help us understand that. And human design is so pinpointed because it is so detailed and so layered with very, very specific things. So there's 6 different kinds of motivation. And as a guilt motivation, your transferred motivation is hope. And
Mhm.
so and you're like, oh, well, I'd rather be in hope than in guilt is a very like obvious, like that sounds like that's flipped. And what's interesting is that it is flipped for some other people. I know people that their motivation is hope and their transferred motivation is guilt, meaning they're supposed to be in hope and they're not supposed to be in guilt, which sounds very obvious and straightforward. But for you, you're supposed to be in quote guilt, which is that help. Is that helper? It's the 5 line energy of being extremely practical, nearly heretical, and really just seeing solutions and jumping in a practical way, but gauging for yourself, like, is this an appropriate thing to jump into? Do I need to hold back? That's you living in your higher vibration motivation. And the lower vibration, the shadow aspect of it for you, it's going to be that delusional hope where you're like, it's gonna work out. And it's like, sweetie,
Mhm.
no, this is not a situation to place hope in. Like, this is one of those times that hope will not work. And so just kind of monitoring yourself that you don't have that delusional hope would be so helpful, I'm sure, to you to be like, okay, I'm doing that again. Okay, we're going to go back into like practical contributions and like figuring that out. And contributions doesn't mean work. It means, can I show up and do a video recording? Can I go to law school? Like that was probably very much in that motivation part of like, this would be extremely helpful. I know you have
Mhm.
a lot on your heart about like showing up in really powerful, specific ways to help specific people through your law degree. And I'm so, so excited for you to be able to bless all of those people that are just, that have been waiting for you to advise them and guide them and support them. And so that guilt motivation, I think, is just so beautiful and powerful for you. I love my motivation is has been equally enlightening. I am what's called innocence motivation,
Mhm.
which means I'm just here to have absolutely no agenda. I am here to feel the sunshine on my face and follow the butterflies and not be driven, not be goal oriented, not be all of these things that like I built so much of my identity on for so many years because I am
Says the Virgo moon. Says the Virgo moon.
Virgo midheaven too. Like I am
Yeah.
so like, okay, here's the plan, calculated, driven, high
Uh,
standards, never good enough, like
mhm,
all the things, right?
mhm,
And
mhm,
it's so true. And then I even have Vesta conjunct my moon. And so I've just got like all of this Virgo energy that's kind of perpetually just expressing so well. And my Virgo moon is in my ninth house. And so it's just, and depending on what housing system you use, or it's in my 10th house, either way, it's a very, very pronounced Virgo moon. And so being able to kind of sit with this and look back and see the times of my life where things just came together beautifully. And I actually had the biggest impact was when I had absolutely no agenda and I was just following a butterfly. And then it's like I would turn around after a while and be like, oh, look at that. And there's like flowers blossoming from where I was walking, like
Mhm.
all these beautiful things that happened that I wasn't contriving and I wasn't setting out to achieve because my transferred motivation is desire, which
Mhm.
is like knowing what you want and going after it. And you get to have what you want and all of those things. And so it's so common for us to hear, like we'll be listening to a coach or to a motivational speaker or to a book, and it's like they'll be expressing from a certain motivation. And it's so easy to
Mhm.
be seduced into like the desire motivation is very seductive because it's like decide what you want and go after it. And it's like that is only correct for the people that have the desire motivation. Like my
Mhm.
14-year-old is a desire motivation and his transferred motivation is innocence.
Mhm.
So for him, I'm encouraging him to be like, what do you want? Like, go after it. Like, what
Mhm.
feels good to you? Set goals, like, achieve. And that is really rewarding to know to help him to lean into that and to know my other children and know how to help support them in their truest motivation and maybe help to watch for flags when they're in their transferred motivation so that I can help be the best authentic support to them, not just helping them, quote, become a good, productive human, but
Mhm.
what does that look like for them individually?
Mhm. Totally. Yeah, and my husband is also desire too, which really fits that lovely Aries moon that,
Yeah.
let's go after it. And but it is so fascinating, when you know this about the people that you love, right? Like when
Mhm.
you can read other people's charts and your own chart, obviously, but really it's very helpful in your family dynamics. It's
Yeah.
super helpful with your children. It's super helpful to just be able to encourage them in the way that they are ready to blossom, willing to blossom, and I think watching people bloom because of this, right? Because of this knowledge that you have and they have as you share and learn and cultivate all of this is just such a beautiful thing, and it's such a, gift to be able to learn all of this and to hear you be able to talk about your experience. And I think it's also, to me, when I thinking about the six motivations, when I was studying them, I just was like thinking about how isn't it beautiful to be able to say all of these are equally good?
Yes.
All of these are
Yes.
it's equally okay. We don't have to be one way, like you were talking about with motivational speakers or whatever. It's always like, go after it, let's do it. But to like realize, no, we don't. It's equally good to be innocence or to be hope, because to me the hope motivation is you're waiting for someone else to fix it. And that is beautiful. And that is okay. It's okay to have this trust and hope that God will come through for you, that other people will come through for you. And it's just as equally beautiful to be able to
Yes.
be have that desire or wanting to fix things, jumping in to help and all of those things. I just think that's really
Oh,
beautiful.
yes. And it's so helpful to know what you are so that you can know how to filter all the advice that's out there that's well-meaning. But maybe if people who are listening to this have had like a coach or a mentor or somebody that like gave them the map, they were like, this works for hundreds of people, and it just didn't work for you. And you did everything. It is more than likely because it was coming through a specific lens, and the people that it was working for they had such a similar lens that it was like, okay, apply steps 1, 2, and 3, and you'll get result 4. And that just hasn't been the experience for so many people that I've gotten to the point where I will not work with a coach or endorse a coach or somebody who's doing some kind of support for life coaching or whatever, unless they understand human design and even astrology. I actually started working with a coach earlier this year. She's a dear friend of mine, and she works with those that are in the high multiple six figures and moving to seven figures. And she actually she's in the transition of only working with eight figures. So
Mhm.
that's not where I'm at this point. And so I was very blessed to be able to work with her at this point. And in working with her, she actually integrated human design actively into her coaching instead of just the conversation she and I would have. It's now part of her intake process because it is so potent. And for her to know herself and then for her to know her clients, turns out in the cohort that I was in, half of us were projectors. And she is a
Mhm.
beautiful sacral generator, and that is amazing. But for her to claim what she is, and even though she's had a very successful career as a coach for so many years, and then to see the distinctive difference in these particular clients that she was working with and be able to help them in very specific ways that just no other coaching method, no other insights can possibly give, is vital because each of the five aura types are so wildly different. Really, the generators and the manifesting generators have a lot in common. Technically, they're the same aura type, but there still is so much distinction. You would never coach a manifesting generator the same way you would coach a generator. And certainly
Mhm.
not a reflector or a manifester or a projector or raise one
Right.
or be married to one or any
Mhm.
of that. And so I think one of my favorite ideas that just shows up more in human design than anything else is we think everyone is just like us, but they're doing it
Mhm.
badly. And so it's
Mhm.
like, well, if you could just be a better human, you would do it more like XYZ. And it's like,
Mhm.
turns out that actually is damaging to most people.
Mhm.
And so that's why I just love this work that we get to do of sharing these like absolute truths with people so they can truly know themselves.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and I love that she's integrating that in such a light-filled way, because there are lots of people out there who know about astrology and who know about human design, but not all of them come from a light-filled place or come from a God-centered perspective. And, it's beautiful to integrate the two of these where it's the same thing for me. The more I learn about astrology, the more I learn about human design, to me, I'm like, wow, that testifies of the perfection of a creator, right?
Absolutely. Mhm.
A beautiful universe, and that's why I loved taking your course, right? Doing the human design, the first iteration of the course, right? And and looking at it from that beautiful God-centered perspective and not having to, worry about or sift through. Not that you can't learn from lots of other people. You can learn from them,
Yes.
but you have to do a lot of sifting. There's a lot of sifting. And
Yeah.
it's nice to be in a space where you feel safe, where you don't have to do that sifting.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I love that there's so many that are coming to this movement because they've been craving and looking for that very God-centered perspective on these things. I think the most universal thing that I get told is I've studied this a lot and I've never heard anybody say it the way that you do. And
Mhm.
it's just me being me, of course, like we are all our own flavor and this is the flavor that I'm supposed to bring. And so I just am so delighted when as a projector when my work is recognized as
Mhm.
being what it is. It's like, oh, good,
Mhm.
you got the point. Awesome. I'm so glad.
Mhm.
But I hope it blesses your life. And just being able to continue to unroll this now certification is like so, so exciting.
Mhm.
So I want to talk about environment. Also, we talked about like your environment is wide valleys. So there's valleys and there's wide and narrow within them.
Mhm.
And with your environment, how has that helped you to kind of adjust your life to be able to really claim even more joy and happiness, especially as a reflector, which your environment is possibly the most important.
Mhm. Well, as soon as I learned it, I was like, "Oh, this makes so much sense." This makes my life make sense, because I, served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, in New York City, and for people who yeah, who don't understand the Wide Valley, right? The Wide Valley is still social and connected, you wanna be connected to people and be able to chat, but it is not in the city, it is outside of the city. It's much more of a suburbs environment, and wide, the meaning of like the wide valley is about, diffusion of noise, not having a lot of noise, having it be more quiet. And I lived and served most of my mission, actually probably 10 or 11 months of out of my mission in one area, and that was Flushing, New York, which is the heart of Queens, and it's basically the whole thing, 80% of the people there speak Mandarin. And that's why I ended up learning Mandarin, even though I started with speaking Spanish. And it is the busiest place in New York City. I promise you. I know you've seen Times Square. I know everyone says Times Square in Manhattan is busy. It is busy, but there is no busy like Flushing. There is no busy. Like, I promise you, there is no busy like that. And I just remember, like, I was younger then, so I had more resilience. I had a little bit more resilience,
Right.
but I remember one day, because when you're younger, you're more experimenting around your environment. But I do remember one day getting outside of the city. We just walked further into the suburbs, and I was like, this is the best day of my life. Like, this is
Yes.
so great. Like, it is so great to not have all this noise. Like, it is so great to just have this lovely, environment that's peaceful. And now learning that, I'm like, oh, this is why. And I live in a city now, right? I live in a city, not in downtown, but a little further away. And it explained to me why I'm like, okay, I need 2 acres. All right. I need some land. I
Minimum.
need some space. Minimum 2 acres. I need some land. I need some space. And it was just like, it made me feel like, oh, okay. All right. Okay. I do know myself, and now I know, I can feel peace and quiet. And I know the spaces I can get away and really help me a lot to feel focused.
I love this so much because like of course that's so valuable and to look back and be like, oh, this makes all the sense in the world. And one of the most interesting things about your chart is when you really start understanding all the pieces, you'll be like, wait, this part and this part contradict. Like, so you're a 4 line, you're a 4-6. And the 4 line is all about your community, your connections, like the people that you know. And you can have community, of course, out like in the rural areas, but it's almost like a walking contradiction. Like there's always going to be those. And what's so interesting is like you're wide valleys and I'm external markets. And so for my environment is markets and then external, which is literally the opposite. And I regularly just fantasize about getting like 20 to 80 acres out in the middle of nowhere and all the things. And I was reading about it recently and it was like you would feel miserable if you ended up in the middle of nowhere. And I'm like, I don't know about that because I'm a 2 line, which is the hermit. And so I'm a hermit, but external
Mm,
markets. And I'm like, how's this
mm,
supposed to work? And my conscious moon and my unconscious sun, both of these very, very prominent placements are in the gate of aloneness or the gate of retreat. And so I have
mm,
all this parts of me that wants to retreat and just go and just
mm,
study and just read books and just make programs and all of the things. And then this other huge part of me that's like, when I get to a place like New York City or go to a conference where there's all the bustle and all the booths and all the people and or I go to like a farmer's market, like it's like my heart just bursts with joy and like it's I love
mhm,
it so much. And so to know that it's like, oh, okay, so there's different parts of me that I need to make sure that the needs are regularly getting met. Like you can move out to the countryside, but you absolutely need your people, which thankfully with
mhm,
technology, I mean, you could be sitting on your 85 acres and like, FaceTiming people that you love or having people come out to you and all of that. But it's so interesting to be able to know like, okay, this is the very fine tuning of how you need happiness. And then to look at your
mhm,
spouse and be like, okay, baby, like what do you need? And make
mhm,
sure that you're creating a life that really does satisfy both of those needs. And sometimes
mhm,
they are directly contradicting, but that doesn't mean that it's not possible. It just means now you have the answers so that you can integrate both people's needs. And yeah,
mhm,
if you've got kids and all the things, it's like, how do I have 5 people's needs be met? It's like, there's a way. There's definitely a way.
mhm, mhm. Well, I do have oh, I have a question for you, but I also have a comment about that is, it's been so potent and helpful for me that I've actually integrated it into my locational astrology.
Hmm.
So when I'm helping people find environments, especially people who are like, okay, I've narrowed down the space, because some people just want to do it and they want to say, show me all the places in the world that are good for me, right? Like,
Right.
show me, general, but some people are like, okay, we can either move here or here in this 50-mile radius. And that, knowing their environment is so
Oh, yeah.
helpful for
Oh,
choosing
yeah.
that and
If they need
integrating
more
that.
of the busy, you bring them closer to a city. If they need, and then it's
Mhm,
like, okay, we're going to get 50 miles out of the city if that's what they need.
mhm,
And
mhm,
and yeah, exactly. Just to have that additional layer of information that if you were only doing locational astrology, you just wouldn't
Mhm.
have, or
Yeah.
other things that like I don't know how to do astrology without human design anymore or human design without
Mhm.
astrology because there's pieces that are only in one or the other. And so it
Mhm.
just it feels like walking blind when you don't know both sides of it. And
Totally.
like there's no ascendant or rising sign in human design. There's no
Mhm.
like first impression.
Mhm.
And there's no like midheaven and housing system and all of that. And like I would never be able to fully let that go. So it's not one or the other. And also the thing is somebody can live a totally full life and not know either of these systems.
Yes,
And
it's true.
so
That's true.
but
Yeah.
it's so fun to help people just understand themselves and then open the door and be like, how deep do you want to go? Because we've got it all here.
Mhm. Mhm. True. So true. My question for you, it was because my husband is markets. I think he's also external, but I'm not sure. But I wanted to know the difference between external and internal. I know that's like a little nitpicky question, but I was
No,
just
it's
curious
not.
about
It's
it.
a huge
Yeah.
difference. So on markets, external is going to literally be like going out and being physically handshake deals, like in
Mhm.
person with people, like going to things where there's a lot of people, a lot
Mhm.
of exchanges happening. It's very classic, like I'm going to the market kind of a
Mhm.
vibe. And
Mhm.
so it doesn't have to be a specific market, but it is something external where you're going. Internal
Mhm.
markets is going to be more like going to a small mastermind or doing an
Mhm. Mhm.
online kind of connection where it's more internal. It's a little bit smaller, it's tighter. It has just like a slightly different vibe. But the big underscore of markets is choices. Is that people who have
Mhm.
markets for their environment, what they need in life is choices and options. And so even
Mhm.
if I'm just like at the store, right? Like I love Harmons. I am their target market.
Mhm.
You know me. Everything is constructed for me at
Uh-huh.
Harmons and it makes me laugh. And like it just delights me. Like I get this little soul giggle when I'm like
Mhm.
looking at like the 18 different options for olive oil, right? Like, and
Mhm.
they're all like geared towards someone like me. I love options. I love being
Mhm.
able to pick and choose because that's my environment. So, like, I
Mhm.
can legit be having kind of a schloggy, awful day and go to the grocery store for like bread and milk, and I will always be lifted because that's my environment. Even though I'm a hermit, even though I have all of this aloneness, like, I have to get up and out. And also, I'm what's called a triple split, meaning I have two
Mhm.
different clusters of energy in my
Mhm.
chart between my six
Mhm.
divine centers. And so I have to be around a variety of people to connect me to myself. And so, like,
Mhm.
some people are very highly a walking contradiction, and some people, like, they've got a lot that's more aligned. And so they're kind of very strongly what they are and very strongly what they're not. I am a wide array of walking contradictions in my chart. And
Mhm.
it's so helpful to know, like, okay, if I'm struggling in this specific way, this is the unmet need, which it's a deliberate daily, weekly investment to do that. So for back to your question for the internal external, like the internal market vibe, I mean I still enjoy that because it's markets,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
it doesn't fill me the way that going to like a busy place for a little
Mhm.
while. Like I can't like be
Mhm.
there all the time because of my other things in my chart, but
Mhm.
there is a specific uplift that I get only from that type of environment that I cannot get if it
Mhm.
was missing. Like if I moved out into the middle of nowhere and never went
Mhm.
into the city and never went to another thing, like I would
Mhm.
probably just sort of become like 20% more depressed in my life and just not
Mhm.
have a way to fill that, you know?
Right. So you really need like the city hideaway. That's what you need.
I've always said my whole life I love living on the edge of a big city, like just a
Mhm.
little bit out because then I can pop in anytime I want, which is very hermit external markets. Like, let me go
Mhm.
run away when I want to, and I'll just come out when I feel like it, and then go into the
Mhm.
city, go to the concerts, go to the things, go to the shops, and then come back. And I'm not really achieving that right now. I live on the outskirts of a smallish city, but like,
Mhm.
it's okay.
It's okay. It's great. Yeah, which is why like my husband with like the same thing, right? He's always like, "Let's move to the city, bigger city. Let's go." And I'm like,
You're like,
Ugh."
"Oh, no, thank
I'm
you."
like, the outskirts of the city,
Right. And
you
so
know.
there's some cities that are very large and very like have like a really good rich culture that maybe you'd align with and you're like, "Cool, can we be like a solid like 75-minute drive from the city? Like close enough we can still go in and have fun, but like really really I'm in that wide valley."
True, true, so true. Oh,
Yes,
I
for
love it.
sure. I love it so much too. Well, I always love our conversations, and I just feel like I could never ever get enough of you, possibly. And I would love for you to share a little bit about the new things that you're discovering in your life. I know you've been chatting a ton about zodiacal releasing, which is endlessly fascinating and very complex. And so I know that you are incorporating that. I would love it if you would speak a little bit to teaching that and what you're learning, and if at all you see connections between that and your human design.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So for people who don't know what zodiacal releasing is, it's basically an ancient timing technique that now has become popularized. It's actually so new because we just found this is like apocryphal scripture. Like we just found these documents, pulled them out of the earth basically and have been translating them for like the last 10 or 20 years, and it's got all this new astrological information, and so that's why so many people have never heard of it before because it's old, but it's new. You know, it's this beautiful ancient timing technique, and it allows us to learn about the peak periods in our lives. So, when will be the more busy, more dynamic, and more important pieces of our lives? It actually breaks down your life into time frames. And you can look at these time frames actually down to the date. And to me, learning about this has just been so added such a huge layer to my belief in God's perfect timing for us. Like everybody's timing is perfect. Your timing is perfect. God has got you. The universe has got your back. You don't need to worry, and it's all gonna work out. It's also just blessed me in understanding the cycles, you know, the cyclical nature of our lives, the cyclical nature of time, and just how it all works together. This works with numerology, which works with human design, and we see this, right? We see the cyclical nature in returns, right? Saturn's returns and Jupiter returns, and all of that in astrology, and we see it in human design and how the transits move, right? And how it makes connections to our helps, you know, light up channels and gates and all of those beautiful things for us. And I think this is just another lovely layer. And so I am, you know, you said it was very complex, and it is, but I am offering a course starting this week. We're going to start on Friday, which is going to be awesome. And it's a set at your own course, you know, set it, go at your own pace, and you will be able to ask me questions and things like that. But, you know, you can get it anytime, and it will be all about how do you use zodiacal releasing, even if you know nothing about human design or nothing about astrology, and how do you apply it to your life to make it work for you. So it's called Have You Peaked? And using zodiacal releasing to take charge of your life. So I hope people will get a lot out of that.
That is so exciting. And just everything that you do is such a blessing and such a help to those around you. And I'm just so glad that you came on to chat. And I hope I'll include the link in the notes here of where people can get information on that. And if there's things about this that have intrigued you and you're like, I want to know more about my human design and I want to dive in more and I want to be able to help support people this way, hands down, the first cohort of the light filled human design certification is going to be absolutely amazing and really put that power in your hands so that you can also very powerfully and uniquely guide your clients or whoever you're working with, or even just your family or yourself, to be able to have a more fulfilling life. So thank you so much, Julie. And I'm just so delighted that you're here. And I look forward to the many more chats that we will have in the future.
Me too. Thank you so much, Naomi. Always a pleasure.